New World is the best running simulator that I've ever played. My character does not skip leg day, that's for sure. Today we're going to go through every tip and trick and piece of advice I've found during my first 20 levels with New World. This will get you through the closed beta and through launch. So without further ado, let's go. This video is sponsored by me. If you're going to enjoy this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the like or dislike button. And let me know in the comments below what tips I have missed so that we can all help each other out. Let's go. As always, I have split these tips up based on their own category. So if there's something specific you're looking for, check the timestamps in the description down below. We are going to start with questing. We'll talk about experience and leveling shortly, but as with any MMO, you should be picking up every quest possible, specifically the faction quest and the town projects. They're easy to miss in each town. You go to their locations at each town and pick up these quests. For the most part, you can ignore most of the town projects. Most of them will be easy to complete, and you may actually just end up completing them by gathering and exploring and just hunting random creatures in the wild. This will just give you free XP when you do go back to town and you do hand these in. Just a good way to get a couple of extra points. And the faction quests do operate very similarly. You will have to go to various locations, kill enemies or search chests, something like that. It's just a good way to get free XP while you're doing your side and main quest. Whenever you do go to a new area to begin questing, you should always be placing your camp and setting your respawn point. One of the most annoying things in New World is dying and then having to run back to a quest area. Specifically, if you have PvP on, you should be placing camps as well as often as possible. So you can, when you die, respawn back at this location rather than your nearest settlement having to run, 1 to 2 Ks just to get back to where you were. If you rest at a camp, you can restore all of your HP as well. And as a quick side note, you should be having a food buff active at all times, specifically from like a light ration, so that you get a little bit of extra HP regen through combat. It's just a good thing to make sure you always have active. Now, once you have cleared a whole area and you are ready to travel back to the settlement, there is really 3 ways that you can fast travel. The first is by recalling to your checked in inn. So checked in, that sounds funny. Basically, whenever you go to a main town, you can check in at the inn and you can fast travel back here every 60 minutes for free. You can only have 1 inn active at a time. Now, for all of the other places and towns that you go to, you can fast travel to them. This will cost you a soth, which is a currency that you get from questing and clearing corruption areas. And for the most part, you're going to have a decent amount of this once you get leveling up and start doing a lot of the quests, but you don't necessarily need to use this unless you have to, because you can use this for crafting, which is more important than just for fast traveling. The main way that I personally fast travel is by killing myself. There is a respawn button in the pause menu that you can click on. You go into game menu, click respawn, and you die. But what you can do then is respawn at either your camp or your nearest settlement. And in most cases, your nearest settlement will be whatever your quest hub is at that time. Or if you want to go back to your camp because you've set it at, another quest area, you can also do that. I use this most often as my fast travel method. The downside here is that your gear does lose some durability, but it is negligible in the lower levels, and you can pretty comfortably just repair it, especially if you are salvaging all of your gear. The last point for questing, even though it is kind of its own subject, is picking a faction and what factions are. Now, there are 3 factions and they are mostly linked to the PvP aspects of the game. However, when choosing a faction, make sure you're picking one that your friends are playing on so that you can actually play together. You can also only join companies, which are guilds, based on the faction that you are in. And there are some other benefits depending on what faction holds what towns and areas and regions and all the other benefits you can get from the rewards from the gear. But for the most part, while you are learning the game, you just need to pick the same faction that your friends are and do the faction quests. Everything else will come with due time. I may make a separate video about PvP and faction combat and how that kind of works in the future. Now let's talk about leveling. So we've talked about picking up every quest, which you obviously have to do, and it's also a really good way just to level up overall. The strategy that I've seen some of the streamers using is that they will go to the town project board and have their viewers give them a ton of resources so they can hand in all of them all at once and just keep doing this cycle. They have nerfed this a little bit, so the timers refresh every 30 minutes rather than every 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes they could just hand in all of these quests and get a ton of experience. I would not recommend to do this method. The downside to this is that your weapon masteries are so important, and by doing this, you are getting no weapon mastery experience whatsoever. So when you hit the max level, you're going to come across other players that have maxed out their weapon masteries and can do vastly different things that you can, and their abilities are going to be so much stronger while you're still sitting there with just the basic 3 abilities with no extra benefits to them. An easy way to get extra experience while you are leveling is to enable PvP for an extra experience gain. The downside obviously is the fear of getting ganked in combat, but the PvP is pretty balanced in that you can kill higher level players as a low level player, as there is a really really aggressive scaling when you are playing PvP. If you are in a group, I strongly recommend to turn PvP on for the extra experience, because you can really protect each other, and it's just a sweet XP buff in that case. Your territory standing points is also another way that you can increase your XP by going into the map. Every now and again, when you gain these territory points, you can pick between 3 options. One of them will occasionally be XP. It is actually worth investing in. I originally didn't think it would be, as I wouldn't spend that much time in these regions. However, you do spend a lot of time in the same regions, so picking up the XP gains is just a good way to get extra XP, obviously, so that you can level up. Another thing you should pay attention to is journals that you see throughout the world. Every time you do pick one up, whether you just add it to your journal or you actually read it, you will gain a little bit of XP. It's about 100 or so, just a good way to get some extra XP while you're exploring. And if you do want to respec your attributes, I highly recommend you do this before level 20, at least at level 19, and play around with it. Because once you hit level 20, it does start to cost gold. It's not that much, it's just worth noting, but if you do want to play around with it, see, whether you want to play as a tank or a DPS or healer or ranged or maged or whatever it may be, it's a good idea to play around with this respec system until you hit level 20. Now, combat. And something that I've found that everyone seems to be struggling with in combat is that this combat system, you should really be thinking of Dark Souls and not World of Warcraft. And what I mean by that is there is dodging in this game and blocking, and the dodging has invincibility frames or iframes. So when you dodge, you will avoid damage completely for a specific amount of time. Whereas in World of Warcraft, a tab targeting combat system, you basically just want to trade blows with whatever you're fighting until you win. It's different here. Basically, you want to avoid damage at all costs, whether that be by blocking or by using the different roll systems, but avoiding damage and then striking back is how you really master this combat system. Depending on your weight class, you will either roll or dodge or sidestep when you do use shift to use a dodge. We'll just keep calling it dodge for simplicity. Remember how I said this is Dark Souls? Well, depending on your weight class, whether you're light, medium, or heavy, this will depend on whether you are heavy rolling or light rolling, using Dark Souls terms. Now, it is a good idea to find the balance, mostly unless you're going to be a tank, you probably want to be in the light category because you do get an extra 20% outgoing damage when you are in the light category. If you're in the medium category, you do get 10% outgoing damage. In the heavy category, you do lose these benefits, but you do gain other resistances, which is probably where the tanks are going to sit. So you want to make sure you're at least in the light medium category while you're exploring the world. For the most case, you won't take enough damage for it really to matter that much. It's just worth getting that extra damage bonus. Now that you've mastered rolling and dodging, when you are attacking enemies, you may notice that your attacks will show up as different colors occasionally. These all have different meanings. The white is basically a just standard damage attack. It didn't do extra damage or lower amount of damage. It's just a standard damage. Blue with a little down arrow means the enemy is resistant to that type of damage, whether it be slash or thrust, whatever type of damage it is. You can tell by the little icon next to the damage indicator. Yellow with an up arrow means they are weak to that type of damage, and orange is a critical hit. As you can have 2 weapons equipped, it's often a good idea to have 2 different weapon damage types so that you can switch between these, whether you're doing a low amount or a high amount, you can switch between them so that you can always at least be doing white damage to most enemies. While you are leveling and switching between weapons, you should try every weapon. There is no reason why you shouldn't. When you are using a weapon, they have a leveling system similar to Elder Scrolls Online, if any of you guys have played that MMO, where you use a weapon, you level that up, and then you can put points invested by those weapon masteries into that skill. So you should play around with most of the weapons and find really what works for you. I've seen a lot of people talking about, oh, what's the meta DPS build and what should I use, this and that. For one thing, at the moment, we're in closed beta, so it really doesn't matter. The second thing is that most weapons are in a decent state. I've seen a lot of people playing around with things and talking in chat about this weapon's better than this, but then, oh, this weapon succeeds at this, and you can just really enjoy whatever you want to play as. Something that I would suggest, however, is depending on the role that you want to play in the PvE aspect, tank, DPS, or healer, you should at least focus on something in that category. For example, tank, you probably want to use the sword and shield, maybe a great axe or a warhammer. DPS, depending on what kind of DPS you want to be, melee, ranged, or mage, you probably want to focus on those weapon masteries and leveling them up. And healer is the life staff and whatever other ranged weapon you want to use, just as long as you have the life staff as your primary and you are at least leveling that up a little bit throughout your playthrough. And we have come to our last category, which is going to be gear. The best gear for leveling you will find is going to be your faction gear, and this is why you should be grinding these quests out as much as you can. When you go to your faction quest giver, there is an option to click rewards in the top right. This will show you everything that they have to sell, and it will cost you some of your faction tokens as well as gold. This really starts at level 15. Once you hit level 15, you should be heading over here and buying every piece of gear that you are using. So all of the armor, whether it be light, medium, or heavy, and whatever weapons you are using, because it will give you a huge increase to your outgoing damage, as well as just make things a little bit easier for you. When you're exploring in the world, a lot of the gear you find will not be at the level that you are actually currently at. I am level 20 at the moment, and I'm still finding gear that's like level 15 and below. So it's better to really pick up this faction gear, at least give you a solid baseline, and then if you are exploring and you do find better gear, you can equip that. Once you do hit the thresholds in the faction menu, you can go and do trials to increase the level, so you can go from rank 1 to rank 2. That'll unlock the next tier, then you can grind that out and get that gear for the next tier. You should salvage everything that you have. You can sell things at the trade store, though it's kind of pointless. Realistically, no one's really buying low level gear, especially in the closed beta. You can just salvage everything, so you get those repair parts, so then you can use those repair parts to repair your gear. Especially if you're using the respawn method that I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to stock up on repair parts so that the respawn method I mentioned doesn't really bother you at all. Now, that is most of the tips that I have for you today. I'm working on some more new world content for the closed beta and for launch as we get closer to that in the next month. So keep an eye on the channel for that. Please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and on Twitch, where I stream 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, Australian night times. Hope to see you guys there in the next stream. Thank you for watching this video. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.